some of this back to camp. Oh, just sunk in the snow up to my knee. I just got a soaker. Oh, that's not good. Hey guys, Mike in the woods here. Man, not the video I thought I'd be making this week. This weekend, I trekked 3 kilometers in snowy, hilly conditions with a 40-pound rucksack to try out my very first solo winter overnighter. And unfortunately, things did not go according to plan. I managed to sink up to my knee in a hidden bog underneath the snow, and I soaked my boot completely through. It was like minus 15 degrees out. After consultation with my far more experienced friends, I decided it was a wise idea to pack up and bail out. I mean, that sucks that I couldn't bring you guys my first solo winter overnighter as a trip video. It does at least give me the chance to discuss the very important lessons I learned on that short and sweet experience. Number 5, I have to be much more careful with my pack weight in winter. This was one of the most surprising things that came about during my prep for this trip, how much my pack weighed. I had to be set for some pretty cold temperatures, but my pack managed to top out at 38 pounds before I even started accounting for my camera gear. I mean, it's not like I packed everything and the kitchen sink. Most of that weight was probably from my cold weather sleep system setup. I had my 3-season sleeping bag and a thick wool blanket so that I could last through the minus 15 degrees Celsius or potentially even colder night. I also had 1.5 liters of water, a steel pot I put in there to boil snow for more water, and my winter pack isn't exactly light on its own to begin with. I find it really easy to add weight up fast, especially if you're on a budget. You can either get light gear or you can get cheap gear, usually not both. In the summer, I guess you can get away with bare bones budget stuff, but I feel like winter camping is where you should really consider the high tier stuff, especially with stuff like sleeping bags, where the difference can literally be tens of pounds between budget and high-end options. Going forward, I'm definitely going to make some significant investments to lighten my load and also get a proper pulk so I can have that option when the trail is really snowy. Number 4, it takes a lot more out of me to cover the same amount of distance. Even if the snow is tamped down on the trail, I've found that it's a lot more difficult to cover the same amount of ground on the trail than it is if it was just hard-packed dirt, rock, or pavement. And that's before I even account for the heavier pack weight. It saps more energy out of me on packed snow. It's also slippery, so if I'm going up and down hills, even if I have good traction on my boots, I fell on my butt at least once on the hike, and I skied down a couple of steep hills. And if the snow isn't packed down, I'm in for a world of hurt because I don't have snowshoes. I'll have to stomp my way through powdered snow. Icy trails can be pretty bad too, constant risk of slipping and causing a severe injury if I fall wrong. I've been pretty lucky so far with icy terrain on winter hikes, but I'm thinking more and more that it would be a really wise idea for me to stop by sale when they're open again and grab a pair of micro spikes, and same with a pair of snowshoes. And after all of that, there's also the worry of dehydration, unlike summer, where you can just stop and fill up your bottle with water from a lake or even a gnarly puddle or something. You don't have that luxury in winter, since everything is frozen. You'll have to take the time to boil snow, and once in your water bottle, your water or even your lid can freeze if you don't keep it near warmth. I had that happen to me on this trip. And don't discount how much the bone-dry, cold winter air can sap at your hydration level. Number 3, setting up camp on fresh powdery snow was challenging. Though I've winter camped a few times now, this is the first time I've had to set up a campsite on fresh, dry, powdery snow about a foot deep. My game plan for this was to tamp down the snow with my boots, string up my tarp, and use a section of it as my ground sheet. After stamping around for a bit, I hadn't really pressed down the snow as much as I was hoping, and I really wasn't happy with the resulting shelter I set up. After consulting with some experienced friends of mine, usually they go with a hammock setup to stay elevated off the ground, or use a shovel to dig out their shelter, or at the very least, have snowshoes to better tamp down the area, much better than a normal set of boots would. And the other thing, this snow loves to get everywhere if you're not careful. It wasn't snowing at all for the entire time I was out there on this misadventure, but between snow falling off branches, overhanging the trail, and getting thrown around everywhere while I was setting up camp, somehow I managed to get it everywhere on my stuff. This can actually be dangerous if your sleep system or your change of clothes gets wet when the snow manages to melt. Number 2, getting wet or soaked happens to me more frequently than I thought. Man, I don't know what it is with me and cold weather camps, but seriously, I consistently manage to get at least one soaked foot on over half of the winter trips I go on. And it's not like these situations are easy to spot either. This particular time, I was on top of like a foot of snow near a frozen lake, and it was like minus 15 degrees Celsius out, so I figured everything would be frozen, but unbeknownst to me, underneath it all was a very wet and soggy bog. The snow in one spot failed to support my weight, and I sank through all the way to my knee. Normally, I would have my friends to help me get all that sorted out, but this time I was out there on my own, and it was very cold. Like I said, minus 15 degrees Celsius before the wind chill. I didn't have an extra set of boot liners, and I had only just started to gather firewood. I did have an extra pair of socks, and my boots are warm when I'm exerting myself, but with the pack off, I wasn't generating enough body heat to stop my foot from getting cold in my boot, and it would have been downright dangerous to stop and allow myself to cool down. It was at this point I realized that I really didn't have an effective way to deal with the situation confidently. I would have had to keep collecting enough firewood to get the fire going, and very carefully dried out my boots and liners without damaging them, all while being immobile since I didn't have any other footwear. Which also sucks, because this is a brand new pair of Baffin Sequoias. Going forward, I'll have to make sure I'm prepared for this situation when it happens, whether it be having an extra set of liners, or just some long thick wool socks and some thick durable plastic bags to separate the wet section of the boot from my dry stuff once changed. And number 1, knowing when to call it quits. This is, I think, the most important lesson to take away from this video. Know when to fold, know when you don't have a winning hand, and take a rain check for the next adventure, especially when you're in a dangerous situation like this. When I sunk in and realized my foot got soaked, I briefly considered staying and trying to deal with the situation, but something I read last week ran through my head. Survival isn't about being badass, it's about staying alive. It made me assess the situation from a logical perspective of what action can I take that is the safest for me given the current situation. And the smartest move with the least amount of risk was to just pack up my stuff and hike back to my car. I still had a few hours of daylight left, the hike was only 3 kilometers, I had the energy, I was out there by myself, and the exertion of the hike would keep my foot warm until I got back to my car where I had a set of shoes waiting. So that's exactly what I did. And like I said, it sucks that my first attempt at a solo winter overnighter failed, and yeah, it's a little embarrassing to have to call it quits because of a wet foot, but it was the most effective solution to deal with the problem at hand, and I don't regret my decision one bit. There's always next time. It's important to admit to not only myself, but you guys, the viewers, when I'm over my head in a situation. So there you have it, my 5 takeaways from my solo winter camp attempt. I'm a hard guy to dissuade, so I promise you guys I'm going to be back out there attempting this again real soon. Though it sucks that I couldn't bring you guys a solo winter trip for this video, I did get a heck of a workout. I managed to hike 6 kilometers in snowy, hilly terrain with a 40-pound rucksack. I learned a bunch of stuff, and even got to try out my new GoPro. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's got some hard lessons learned out of the woods, winter or otherwise. What have you guys learned the hard way? Let me know in the comments down below. If you're interested in some of the other winter camping type stuff I've done, check out the description, I'll leave some links. And finally, if you're new here, I take a look at how fun, futuristic technology can intersect with traditional outdoors experiences, such as 3D printed parts on the pack frame saw I had out with me on this trip. Check out my other videos and consider subscribing if that's your thing. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next video.